Hi, my name is Bethany, and today I wanted to share with you about autistic meltdowns and shutdowns. Now, if you watched my interview with my ASD journey on his channel, you may have noticed that he asked me about what I would call a meltdown. And I had two different terms that I personally used, a meltdown and a shutdown. Now, this was just from my personal perspective and assumption, so I'm going to give you what I've assumed it is before I go into what the internet is saying it is. So what I thought of as a meltdown was basically any time that I was losing control and acting out. So that would be like screaming or hitting or just things that are kind of like violent and outward and I don't necessarily have a lot of control over. It's like an impulse and it kind of happens. This might seem kind of like a tantrum to a parent, except for instead of throwing a fit in order to get something or have their way, an autistic person having a meltdown is not doing it to manipulate, and they're also not really doing it out of their own will, but it's happening outside of their will because they're overloaded, they can't handle what's going on. So then we get to shutdown. For me, that would be almost kind of like depression, but not quite. It's where like the world is being shut out. You can't always respond to external stimuli, but a lot of times there's still a lot going on in here. For me to get through the day, a lot of times I could be task focused, so that way all I had to think about was that one thing and I could get through the day, and other times I couldn't even do that. Like I couldn't even do simple things, and it was just like shutting everyone and everything out. It almost feels like I'm cold to the world. In search of what a meltdown and a shutdown technically are, I did find a source that said that a meltdown is basically any time that you lose real control, whether that is an inward or outward response. So that would be like the shutdown response of not really being able to maybe speak or interact with the world, or the outward response where, you know, you might see some very violent things or loud things or something like that. However, as I continued to search, I did find other sources that described meltdowns and shutdowns as separate things due to the fact that one is inward and one was outward, but they are both characterized by a lack of really ability to control what's happening. So at the end of the day, a meltdown or a shutdown is really the time when an autistic person or person with Asperger's is triggered beyond their tolerance, basically. I have a pretty good tolerance for even the things that really trigger me, like sounds and visual things that are like too much, physical sensations and stuff like that. But when those things pile up, as well as social situations and stuff like that, there's just times where I can't handle it anymore, and it's just, something happens, whether it's a meltdown outward or a shutdown inward. A lot for me is a shutdown before I ever get to a meltdown, but they've both occurred. What I think is important for you to know though is that both meltdowns and shutdowns are, again, not something used to manipulate, and it's also not something that you should mock or make fun of or anything like that. It is out of the person's control when this occurs. They can't help it. It's not to throw a fit, it's not to ignore you or make you feel bad. It's just happening because their system, their body cannot handle it anymore, and they need to do something to bring things back into balance. And meltdowns and shutdowns can be pretty extreme. For meltdowns, this can be, you know, physically hitting themselves or someone else, screaming, those sorts of things that seem really scary and violent. And then there are shutdowns that make people unable to move their bodies at all, or just unable to speak. For me, sometimes that's just going monotone and having a difficulty getting words out. Some people can't even respond to their name being called for like several times, stuff like that. So it can be pretty extreme when we're triggered over our tolerance. However, I would encourage you not to be afraid of these things, because that alone can make things worse. And to know that it's just a thing that happens, and we can learn from when those meltdowns and shutdowns happen and see what led up to that point and start to try to identify what triggers those things so that we can avoid them as much as possible. But there are going to be days that they happen, and again, it's not in your control or the person with autism or Asperger's control, and sometimes people just need some space, and sometimes people just need things to stop for a little bit. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. If this helped you understand anything more about meltdowns and shutdowns, or if you've had them or anything like that, just let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe. I upload it to this channel every Thursday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. So if you don't want to miss an upload, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I hope that you're having a wonderful week, and I hope you'll see me in my next video. Bye!